right. How is everybody? Woo! Cool, cool. So hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully we're all in the right place. You could be seeing Omar Sharif, not the cool Egyptian actor, but the cool other speaker over there. But thankfully things are recorded. So whichever talk you want to make it to, hopefully you're in the right spot. I am Deviant. I'm going to talk to you about keys, and specifically replicating keys in ways that you might not have done it before and you might not know was even a feasible vector of attack. So who am I? Some of you came up and said hey, some of you saw me last year, some of you know me, some of you don't. I am part of a covert entry team. My crew and I get into buildings. Like, that is our job. We do physical pen testing, we do, you know, kind of dangerous door kickery stuff. It's a good gig if you can get it. Like, it's absolutely a lot of fun. I actually put up a blog post recently because so many people kind of write into all of us and say, man, I love that gig you all do. How do you do that? I'm like, well, you know, be a 10-year overnight success, I guess. But there's some advice I've given online about getting into this, and there's some advice I give to people who practice the idea of covert entry in the field. Just for those of you this isn't quite your whole forte, let's talk about covert entry. Here is an example of just a really, really basic attack, right? Like latch slipping. So using a traveler hook to slide the latch out of the way on a door that was locked because of bad door fitment, absolutely valid vector. We talk about this, I mentioned this in my talk last year. This is a classic example of a covert entry, right? As opposed to an overt entry, right? So here's the use of a Hackin bar, smashing exactly at the right spot on a door, breaking through where it's been reinforced. Definitely not covert when you're doing this kind of thing, right? It's really cool, though, to see practitioners, these are fire responders, knowing exactly where to strike on a door to get right through it, even a hardened, reinforced door. And you might think that, like, overt destructive entry is never allowed on jobs. You'd be wrong. Like, this is me in a construction outfit with my partner, Rob, and we're just drilling a lock out of a door because we were advised by the client to go loud because we hadn't been caught yet on this job. And I'm like, all right, get the hammer drill out. And, like, this is midday. Like, no one's stopping us. A security guard looked at a monitor and was like in the SOC. They're like, are we working on doors today? And someone else was like looking through their papers like, yeah, there's been a lot of construction. I think we're doing doors. Yeah. All right. But again, that's overt versus covert. And we'll talk about these terms, the idea of overt and covert. What is this kind of manipulation here? This is just raking of a lock, right? Anybody who was last night at the lockpicking gunfight, anybody who Sulfur was teaching, he was teaching this out there. So yeah, manipulation of the pins, covert entry. The difference between overt and covert, it's who notices that somebody got in. So if you have no training whatsoever, you'd probably still notice that, like, this is a problem, right? You don't have to be a physical security expert to be like, that wasn't like that yesterday. That's overt entry. And now even something like this, a little bit to a lesser degree, but I would expect an average person with no specialized training could notice that something happened to this door, right? It was forced, it was, you know, a pry bar was in there. That is overt entry. Compared to when a specialist with particular training and skills and tools can notice something happened. This is forensic locksmithing. This is using a borescope inside of a lock and actually looking at tool marks based around a manipulation attack. So who can notice that someone got in there? Well, not your average person, but a specialist will notice. So this is an example of covert entry. Covert doesn't mean there's no evidence. It just means a specialist or someone trained to look for it is the one who will find the evidence. So again, was this overt or covert or surreptitious? We haven't talked about surreptitious, but we will. Which one was this? This is very overt. I'm pretty sure that even if you don't have any training, you'd be like, that hole's not supposed to be there. How about that latch slipping that I did? This is interesting when people say, oh man, I'd love to get in like a ghost like you, leave no trace. Did we leave no trace? No, there's scratches on that latch. This is absolutely covert. A specialist trained to look for this would spot that instantly and say, well, this is not the strike plate of the door. Something was in this latch work that shouldn't have been there. Surreptitious inspection, actual inspection forensically, looking for covert marks, can be really detailed. Does anyone know what this device is that this gentleman's working with? Yes, it's an SEM, scanning electron microscope. We've put pins in an electron microscope to gather forensic data. Here's a pin with no scratches, here's a pin with a lot of scratches. Those scratches are not from a key. That is covert entry, manipulation. The evidence is there. The last category, though, surreptitious entry, that is the category of attack which is really a unicorn kind of technique. It's very hard to achieve. The idea of a surreptitious entry is when your average person won't know it happened, and even a specialist looking specifically for evidence probably won't know it happened. Surreptitious entry is hard. One of the few real achievable vectors for surreptitious physical entry is duplication of keys. And when you think about it, even if it's a weird specialized key, if you can duplicate it on the same, blank, the same stock of metal, the same brand of lock, if you use that key and it works, that key is only going to touch and scrape the inside of the lock the same place that the regular key would have. It's going to leave the same marks that a conventional key would. And even if someone goes in there with a scope, they're like, well, all right, something's been in here. No one can really conclusively testify to the fact that this was like an attack. And this is why it's really a cool technique to talk about, and it's one of the few ways that we can fully deniably get into a building sometimes. So remember, you want to not be overt. You want to be as covert as you can, surreptitious if possible. By the way, this overt entry, you know who the perpetrator was? The perpetrator was a goat, always out to get you. So yeah, absolutely. You want to be more surreptitious than a goat.
It shows a goat ramming its way through a glass door at an office park. After the breakthrough, the animal runs off, but then comes back
F you,
and
door.
shatters the door.
He comes back for more. I love it. He's just like pissed off at this.
There
He didn't get his loan qualified at this office, apparently.
Crime, though, still an
So yes,
mystery.
we're going to talk not about overt or even covert. We're going to talk about surreptitious or non-goat related entry. For those of you who didn't do any of the lockpicking stuff before, want a quick refresher, inside of a lock, how does a lock work? Well, you've seen a lot of lectures about this before. There are pins in a lock. The red ones are called the key pins. The blue ones are called the driver pins. If you have the correct key, your key goes into the lock, pushing all of those pin stacks to just the right height so that none of them are binding or blocking, and that plug is able to turn. Now, if you're not a locksmith, you may not be aware that the actual bitting cuts on the blade of the key, they have very specific depth values. It's not like just an infinite range of possibilities. Here's this first position. We can have very specific, very regularly spaced intervals of cut. And manufacturers have bitting charts, and locksmiths can reference bitting lookup charts. So you can see exactly what measurements on a key would correspond to different cuts. If you have those bitting values, you have the code of the key, you can reproduce a key. You can go somewhere else and reproduce a copy, even if you're not walking into a store, like a hardware store, like we normally would think of copying a key as, well, here's my original, stick it in the stylus duplicator machine. You don't need the original to make a key, and that's part of what we're going to talk about. There's a few scenarios for copying a key illicitly, and we're going to walk through the idea of trying all of them. And I have all the gear if you want to try this afterward. There's even going to be a contest at the very end where you'll do what you're going to see right here. And in a little bit of time that we have at the end of the con, I guarantee you people are going to generate working keys for locks that I brought. So scenario one, the best possible case scenario, if you want to get a copy of a key, the best case scenario is if you have even brief hands-on access to that key. Like someone briefly is like, here, go get this from the supply closet, bring this key right back. Even going hands-on for a minute or less, you are usually able to very reliably get data off of that key. What's the easiest way to do it? Get yourself calipers. Every key, remember, has very specific values for its measurements. These are the cheapest and, decent enough calipers you can get on Amazon. I was shocked when I was like, what? Under 12 bucks? Okay, great, fine, I'll buy these, go for it. How would this work? Well, it would work exactly as you might imagine. You stick the bitting teeth in the caliper and you measure those depths and you reference your lock chart. Let's look at this one right here. This is a Sargent brand lock. I can tell from the head of this key. So I get my Sargent lock chart. It shows me the actual depth values for all the possible cuts. Well, let's compare that and let's do some math right now. This first cut, which value does it look like it corresponds to? Which bitting value? Shout it out, I can't hear you. Yeah, that looks like a 2 to me. How about the next one?
3.
Yeah, I like that for a 3. Moving down the line, looks pretty similar, right? We got another 3. How about the next cut here? 030 is what? It's another 2. Finally, some variety. We got a little something different. 248, who's that? Yeah, we're marching along down this whole key, not taking a lot of time, right? What's the last depth, by the way? It's a 3. There we go. That's the whole bitting code. You can use this value absolutely to generate a key later. If you know the blank, you know the manufacturer is a standard series of depths. We have absolutely done this really quickly, put the key back, and gone home, gone about our merry way to generate that key later. Now that's walking around with calipers, which you kind of have to fuss and fart with, and you're either really good with your memory, which, go figure, my memory's not great, or you're writing things down. There is kind of an even easier way to do this if you have what's called a key gauge. Has anyone ever seen one of these in any locksmithing kit? Some people, I'm seeing nods. Yeah, it is literally just a pre-cut series of gauge marks for different brands. Everything that we're about to talk about, all the different tools or techniques, they're all trade-offs. The trade-off here is that this is a lot easier to use. You stick the blade of the key in, slide it over till it stops, bam, 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 you're just cranking out values. It's easy, but the trade-off is you need to have a cut on the key gauge that works with your brand of lock. Now, most popular key gauges have really common popular locks on them, but if you get a real obscure oddball key, well, back to the calipers. Look it up in your code book. There's one other technique that you can have this kind of in your back pocket as a tool, and we have these in our field kits. If you come up against something that you've never seen, you're like, I don't even know what brand this could possibly be, but I want to take a quick imprint I want to get all the information out of this key and get it back to my home base and figure it out there. Because these key gauges are great for measurements, but they don't capture what? They don't actually capture the profile of the key. If you're coming up against something you've never seen, you're like, I need to ask other people on my team, maybe one of them knows this brand, I've never heard of it. What we will sometimes do is just do a clay impression. Have a little pocket clamshell mold, you squeeze the key in it, and you can even see stab straight into the tip so you get the profile of the key. Now you have all the information about this key, and you can decode this later at your leisure. You can take calipers to this later and measure it back at home base. You can check that profile against a whole big table that I'll show you of different key profile data, but you have all the information, and you've done it in a way that didn't involve any metal, so this can come through metal detectors, you can get out of the building, you've exfiltrated the entire key detail, and you did it just in like 10 seconds or 15 seconds of someone handing you a key. Well, that's great if someone hands you a key with the expectation that you're going to be out of their sight, even briefly. What if there is no expectation that you're out of their sight? What if you're near their key, or maybe they're just slightly distracted, like the keys are on the table and they're on a phone call over here, and you're not really taking the key away from this person? There's options. Our favorite option, take photo of the key. This is not weird spy stuff. This is absolutely 100% feasible. Because again, remember, those bidding depths are very specific, predictable depth patterns. I have made a bunch of little chart lines that I can just superimpose in Photoshop or GIMP or any image editor, and I can just look down the lines and say, okay, boom, 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 okay, this lines up, this is great. Now, the best way to go about this, if you're going to take a photo of a key, it makes your life easier if you could put it on a piece of graph paper, because then even later on in Photoshop, you can kind of straighten it out. If it's not perfect, you can make it more perfect, or at least a little more gooder. Now again, are you walking around with a giant thing of graph paper? No. What I brought for a bunch of you is I keep these around. These are just ISO credit card sized. I laser them out. You stick them in your wallet. So if someone is just barely distracted for a minute, we've done this literally at like security guard desks. One time, it was great. We walk in a building, and like, you know Bobik is just very deadpan. Bobik just wants to get a guard away from a desk, and Rob is standing at the desk. Bobik just walks away, comes back, he's like, your elevator's broken. And just kind of walks back to the elevator. And this guard is like, what? Oh, damn it. And like walks over to the elevator. And Rob just kind of boom, boom, takes some photos of the guard's desk, takes some photos of the keys, some other information. 5 seconds. Doesn't really touch much. And the guard's like, buddy, you're crazy. And Bob was like, oh, I just must not have pressed it right. Okay, thanks. Yeah, getting a photo and then using these little lines, which, by the way, love you. Here you go. They're all for free. We used to just give them to our students, but I just threw them online for you. If you know anything about Photoshop or image editing, absolutely lay these over top of a photo. Wow, out come the phones. It's like I'm at a concert. Ruin it for the person behind you in all your concerts. That's it. That's right. Your kid will look blurry and oversampled audio forever. That school play. All right. No, it's okay. Capture this. I'll throw the links up later. But yeah, taking a quick photo and putting the grid lines over it, absolutely feasible. How shitty can your photo be? This is kind of fun. So let's say the person is literally right there, still next to you, just, their keys are just sitting down on a table. Well, many of you are good with like the kind of covert cell phone photo operation, right? If you take some covert photos, you can absolutely do a photo just even shitty and off angle and correct it out in Photoshop. So for example, I was invited to be somewhere and I was consulting on some project. And there was like a key, they let me into the room, and I think there was an AV closet because I was presenting a thing later to a board of people. And like, okay, well, here's our network equipment closet. We'll turn on the speakers. And they just plonk this key down right next to my laptop. I'm like, oh, this will be fun. Flip. And I wanted to show them later that I could decode their key really easily. So this is a terrible photo. Like, this is zoomed in digitally right now. It's at an off angle. There's shadows. But again, if I throw this into Photoshop, use the grid lines, and just twist and fart around with it, you can straighten this out. And the way I've made, if this we'll look at it a little more closely, all the grid lines I threw up there for you, the black lines are the actual bounded edges of the blade of the key, the bottom and top of an uncut key. And there's always some part of that blade, usually right up near the bow of the head, that's uncut. So you've got enough to figure that out. And then the blue and gray lines, those are evens and odds. So all the blue lines are evens, the gray lines are odds. This is a Schlage, so it actually starts with 0. So it goes down from there. Is this a 0? No. 1, 2, 3. What is this first cut? Yeah, it's a 5. What's the next cut? Is it blue or gray? It's blue, so it's even. What's the next cut? 2. Right on. If the bottom gray line is 9, what's the next cut below that? What's the next cut over? Shout it out. Yeah, 7. What's the one beyond that? Just one more above it than that, right? We got a 6. This is feasible shit that any one of you can do. And you can crank out a key, again, from a terrible photo. We can then take this bidding data and generate a key because we know the brand of lock. Schlage is super common. We know we have the blanks. And you can generate this key, which we did. We did it in the same classroom while we were addressing these people giving a report. And it was really fun for us, and it was kind of eye-opening for them. So nowadays, when I go around places in life, if I just see keys hanging out, I will always try to take photos because it's really funny. This is a Medico key. I could decode this key. This is a key hanging off the belt of a guard while I'm standing there getting checked into a building. Absolutely, that is completely decodable right there. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I can absolutely do this. It freaks me out that I'm in a lot of Lyft and vehicles like that where people have their own personal keys and like people coming in and out of their car day in and day out. I mean, this is the way I think because my brain is insane, but like a lot of people are leaking a lot of personal key data. If you want to protect your keys, by the way, from kind of casual observation, either A, keep them in your pocket, or if you're like me, like I use a carabiner for my keys, I do have this extra little tool that I found online, and it slips over the head of a key. Now, it's a useful tool. It's a little wire stripper and screwdriver and bottle opener. But the idea is, most of the time when your keys are hanging out somewhere, this little tool is covering them up. So it's an added bonus. It's a little extra protection, and you can kind of guard your privacy a little bit that way if crazy people like us are around you. We like to say you shouldn't hold your ID up to like the camera and be like, look at my ID. If you don't follow SOB on Twitter, he has like a script that retweets people showing their IDs and stuff online. Like, you wouldn't hold your ID up. You probably shouldn't hold your keys up to the camera. This was, somebody who I can't believe I got the house that I've always been dreaming of. All right, thank you for the key. This was the head of security at some club we were at after HackerCon in Montreal. And he's like, oh, what do you guys with these locks and stuff on the table? We're like, oh, yeah, we're super into locks, and we love keys. We got some cool keys. Show me, what are your keys, man? And he's just, holding up his keys. I'm like, all right, thanks. That's awesome. I hope they don't go to something. Maybe don't tweet your keys either. I understand you're proud of your first day at work. If anybody saw April Wright's talk day 1, absolutely. People do this sort of stuff all the time. They tweet badges. This was a reporter who tweeted, they did a pocket dump. There is so much information going on in this photo. All of these keys are decodable. You could probably tell, first of all, who could tell me which keys are probably their house keys? Yes, the quickset. Why do you think it's this quickset in the Schlage? Because it's on the same key ring as what? The car key, absolutely. This much more likely to be their office keys down here. I love that we also have a little key fob. We got a little prox fob with the card badge data on it because that's wonderful. Good job. Maybe don't Pinterest your keys too. I get it. This is a cute Christmas ornament that someone made for their new apartment, but don't put it online, please. So in the real world, there's a lot of less than ideal ways to get this key data, but it's totally feasible. If in the real world you are trying these photos, and the first time you do it, you might be a little like nervous, and I only have, oh, is this person going to turn around? A little tip from me to you, to make your life easier, do anything you can. Spend the extra second to separate the key from other keys. Maybe give it some contrast. Like I just had a black hat that I flipped off for a second and swung it behind this key. This, as you can see, it's a building master key, stamped with the M. And I just like, whoop, took a quick photo. Now again, it's kind of off angle, but the contrast, the black background, the crispness, it's gonna make my life a lot easier when I try to decode it later and get the key codes using one of those image templates. Speaking of key codes, sometimes a quick photograph is all you need because of something called blind or direct bidding codes. Well, let's talk about these two things. First of all, let's just talk about direct bidding codes. Some people are not aware that the numbers that may be stamped from time to time on your keys have incredible value in the keys and lock systems that you're using. Look up top, we have 86555, we got a 228333. Do those look like they might possibly correspond to these bidding values? Yeah, those are called direct bidding codes. That is the key information. Forget like using your gauge and your, trying to graph paper. If you can just take even a shitball photo of these keys and get that number legible, you've got the key data. And this happens a ton. I ask people sometimes in our classes, we're like, everyone, some people now are checking their pockets. I'm seeing people reaching, like, look at your keys. You will find keys, probably in your own key collection, that have numbers on them. And knowing what you know, think of shallow is usually a low value. The deeper you go is a high value. Like, you're gonna be like, oh God, that's a direct bidding code. I was in the TOOOL Slack and I was like, hey guys, I'm about to do this presentation. If anybody has a couple of photos of direct bidding codes, I would love, and like my Slack blew up. So people are just reaching in drawers, like John was like, yeah, I think I got some, and then Brett was like, yeah, I think I've got a few like that too. I'm gonna give the top prize to Scorch when I asked for direct bidding code photographs, because Scorch sent me this photo, and I was like, no. He's like, nope, yep, that's one of our properties that we went to once. It was an Airbnb, and he's like, he looked at the key, he's like, can't believe it. So that's bad. You don't be this person, maybe, just let's try to get on board with that. Now, in order to obfuscate or try to protect bidding data, there is such a thing as a blind code. So if we look at this packaging, and you may see this a lot at hardware stores, if a customer wants to be able to buy multiple lock sets that are all keyed alike, the manufacturer will sometimes, stamp them like this on the outside of the package. So it says keyed alike, 48849. Well, I can tell you just by the head of this key, and I know this brand, this is a clone of Kwikset. Kwikset doesn't go deeper than 7, right? So this cannot be a proper bidding value. There's 8s and 9s in this. This is an example of an indirect or blind code. Now there's a master lookup table somewhere that the manufacturer has, but the idea, it's like a hash. As long as you get multiple packages that have the same blind code, you know that they're all going to be keyed alike, and if you're installing them around a big property, they'll all match. Well, if you want to reverse this out, easiest way to do it, well, the super low-tech way is just open the package and look, because the keys are stamped. The keys are not stamped with 48849. They're stamped with, that says 23252. Does that look like an indirect or a direct bidding code? Yeah, that's the direct bidding code. And the great thing about this, the super poor man's lookup table, is that you can read it through the packaging. So if you just want to, if you find like Home Depot trash outside of an install and it has a blind code, they probably bought it at their local regional Home Depot or Lowe's. Go there, look on the shelf where they probably get a shipment, a pallet of all the same blind code, get the direct bidding code. There you go. Even kind of more interesting, I noticed more and more I'm finding padlocks. Take a look at some keys for padlocks. Here we have a master lock, a little M1 blank, stamped 3188. Well, if I turn this key sideways, does that look like a direct or indirect code? Yeah, that does not look like 3188. That's clearly a blind code. But I mentioned lookup tables, right? Lookup tables, master locksmith references, are resources that exist. So if we just punch code 3188, okay, yep, series found, 6136, key cuts. Really? Does that maybe look like 6136? Yes, it does. Thank you, master lookup table. But of course, this is stamped on the key. Like if I have the key, I could take a photo and I could copy it, I could do a lot of things. It would be much worse if it was stamped on the lock. Oh shit, it is stamped on all the locks. Okay, whoops. So yeah, lookup tables for blind codes to reverse that out to the direct bidding code, absolutely useful. Works for combinations as well. If you look on the back of most combination dial locks, depending on the age and vintage, a lot of times you'll either see a stamped or indelibly inked series of numbers. Again, this is not the combination of this lock, but there are resources. There are police and locksmith resources. There are whole code books. They are all in like scanned as PDF now that I have. If you ever want them, just ping me, I guess. They're probably out of copyright. They're very dull if you just read through them front to back. I don't recommend that. But you can absolutely just scroll through them, find the code series. There you go. If you want an easier solution that doesn't involve like grepping through PDFs and shit like that, well, there's software. Instacode, locksmithing software. What happens if we just do a code search in this Instacode software? We punch in the number on the back of our master lock. We say, okay, search, and it farts out a bunch of results. But we know the brand. It's a master combination lock, so we scroll down to that, click reveal. Oh, wow, 321432. There's our code. Oh, and yeah, by the way, Instacode is an app on your phone. So $9 a month, you too can have basically code lookups to beat the band. Awesome, awesome stuff to do. We've done all of these things on jobs. It's really funny. Personally, I think one of the coolest things, and our buddy Drew on our team, he loves doing this. If you have no access to a key at all, you still can get the bidding values of a lock. You can reverse out and get the key values and make your own key and do it pretty surreptitiously. The way you do this, well, you steal the lock. If you can disassemble a lock, which, yes, I understand that disassembling and taking the lock out of the door means you probably have access to that door, but you might be doing that at like 2 in the morning, and you want to come back during the day and not look like a crazy person disassembling a door, which, yes, I realize you put on your high vis and hard hat, you can do that too, like you saw, but if you want to be super surreptitious about it, absolutely, snatching a lock, disassembling a lock to get the pins out, it's not hard. You use a very thin piece of metal. It's a technique called rear shimming. Locksmiths do this all the time with a key blank. Using a key blank and a thin piece of metal, essentially, I'll diagram it out for you. It's like this. If you free up the tail side of the lock, so this thin shim of metal can reach in to the rear side, well, it's going to bump into those pin stacks, right? But if I have a key blank, which raises the pins as high as they could ever go, and if I slowly extract this key blank, those pin stacks are going to naturally drop through a range representing all possible values they could ever have. And I keep a little bit of tapping pressure on that thin shim, I can slowly advance it one by one through those pin stacks until I've got them all separated out. Then I can spin the lock over, I can disassemble it. The lock is completely open, even though I didn't have to pick it, didn't have to leave forensic evidence. What was the only thing touching across the bottom surface of those pins? A blank key. Do you think a key blade is going to touch those pins the same way a regular key would? Yeah, it actually is. It's not going to leave marks that are anything other than ambiguous. And if you can dump those pins out, that is your bidding value right there. You can measure these pins with the calipers just like you measured the blade of the key. If you get a nice big locksmith's pin kit, like here we have one on our workbench, you notice all the pretty pins, but you also notice it has a whole big chart of resources up here. This is, if you're repinning a lock, you need to know which values correspond to which cuts if you're building a lock system. Well, take a look at these charts. That is your decode data right there. Again, in this case, we're looking at a Sargent brand lock because we could tell that from the keyway. I've got all my pins. Here are all of my key pin values. Well, if I take my pins and my calipers, what does this first pin look like? If you remember the code, you could just remember from the earlier, right? What was it? Yeah, that's a 2 value. How about the next one? 0.2010. What is that? A 3. How about the next one? It's another 3. Absolutely. 1.9. Not always going to be perfect, right? But you get as close as you can. So this is probably what? It's probably a 2. Absolutely. Going on down the line, and within a few seconds, you can reverse out and decode the full bidding value. There you go. You reinstall that lock, you put it back where you found it, you can make your own key that will then work in that door, or if it's a mastered system, maybe you're decoding the master key. I've talked about that in other talks years ago at Hope. There's a talk still online about mastering master keys. It's not difficult. It's just math and understanding how master charts work. By the way, if you want to steal a lock, there's kind of the way we look at the world. We're looking around for candidate locks on job sites. Usually they are locks that aren't going to get a lot of use. Locks kind of on doors to nowhere. So if I want to reverse out a master keyed system, like this is clearly a patio that has, it's like a smoker's patio with nothing on it, a door that's probably never really locked, a door that obviously has mounting screws on the hardware, so I can pull this out really quickly because I'm on the inside of the door, I broke in through another way, I just want to steal the lock and leave. Sometimes if you have a door that you cannot attack at all, you search around the other parts of the building and you say, well, I got to find a different lock. Again, if it's a mastered environment, you can reverse out the master key. What do you think one of our favorite locks is in a building, in an office environment, a door that probably is on the master key ring, but is probably never ever really locked during daily operation? Any ideas? I heard it over here. Absolutely. Instead of targeting this door, go to the bathroom. Look at how many offices you work in and operate in that have bathrooms that have locks on them, and the most you'll ever see is maybe during service, a janitor's in there, but he or she is going to just use the thumb turn on the inside. They're really not messing with the key. Because that's a problem, right? If you steal this lock, first of all, if you steal the lock and leave, leaving a hole in the door, is that a little covert or is that more overt? That's a little overt. Now, we've been instructed to do that on some jobs, and it's funny seeing if the client will notice or report it to the right place. But we want to be a little better than that. What we'll usually do is have a pocket, full of a couple of different replacement cylinders. And you pull all right, oh cool, LFIC, we've got one of those. Slap one of ours in, cool. No one's probably using that lock. No one's really going to notice that this lock has been replaced because it looks fine. The super, super secret squirrel way to do this, though, is you swap the lock that you're stealing with what's called an any key lock, or a super Maison keyed lock. This is a lock I've disassembled. I've dumped out the original pins, and before I went on site, I prepared it thusly. I put a whole row of 0-bitted pins, and then does anyone know what these little tiny guys are? They're for mastering. They are single size, which is out of spec for Schlage, by the way. There's no such thing as a single size master, but I just made a whole stack of pancakes of these little thin pins. That makes this lock operable with any key. So if I swap this back in the door, I've made off with the real building's lock. And even if someone from their company were to come along with their key that I haven't figured out yet, it doesn't matter, because this lock will work with any key that will ever exist in Schlage systems. And then I can come back later after I've decoded it, put their lock back, I have a key that works. How long does it take to swap locks out? Not that long. Here's a little video of Drew and I. This is outside of a data center. This is like the back door. So we were in the building because we had tailgated in. We came out a back door. You'll see a ladder in the background because, subject for another day, we stood up and we masked out their door sensor. So we applied a magnet so the door sensor wasn't going to alert. We do have this door open longer than 30 seconds, but not much longer. Here we go. I've unset the mortise cylinder. Going to spin that cylinder out. It's a complicated lock, I'm not going to lie. Drew had to take a while disassembling it and measuring. It's a Medico, took some time, but he got to do that all off-site. He did that at home back at base because I swap in a cylinder from my pocket. In this case, it's not an any key cylinder, but it is a cylinder we have a key for. So now we gave ourselves persistent access to this building because we had masked out the door sensor, and now we've replaced the mechanical cylinder with one that we own. So nobody from the outside, unless they're highly trained, would be able to notice this happened. We didn't really leave weird tool marks or anything. It's just a screwdriver touching screws, which normally get touched by screwdrivers. And in the end, you're about to see, this has been what, like 50 seconds, 45, 50 seconds? Before you know it, we're gone. Like nobody from the client even noticed that that door was open, and we just drove off site, and then Drew had all night long to decode a really complex master keyed system. Now the door where we didn't have access. And there you go. Now that's the ideal scenario, right? That's the ideal scenario where everything works smoothly and you have all your tools back on site. If all you have is time in a building and all you've got is your opportunity with the key or the lock for 1 minute before you don't want to take anything off site, I made something else for you. Remember those key gauges that we talked about? I found them to be a little bit lacking. I designed this a while back. The Devious decoder card, as we started calling it internally. It looks a little different than most locksmith key gauges. A locksmith key gauge, because locksmiths, by their nature, are usually measuring keys because a customer needs a key copied. This card, yes, will measure keys like a locksmith key gauge. That's fine. That's what we use it most of the time for. So I can measure the Schlage key, okay, that works just fine. But the other cuts, there's Quickset, Schlage, and Master and American, the most common locks in the US. It also has cuts for pins. So if you do a disassembly, you don't need your calipers, you don't need everything else, just bam, 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 bam. Where does the pin fit? Okay, it fits in here, move on, bam, bam, bam. So I found it kind of useful. Maybe if you do this sort of work, you might find it useful. If you want one, I just farted this up online too. Now, it seems like I'm being magnanimous. I will point out, oh yay, Devious releasing everything for free, isn't he awesome? I mean, sort of, but you notice I make these out of plastic, so they're non-metallic. They can get through a lot more spaces. They don't really bend or warp. It's surprising how well they will work as plastic. You know what's not fun though? Is getting laser cuts just right in plastic. I have done so many test runs and so many iterations and so many different types of material and lit shit on fire and like change laser power, and because I'm fighting with the melting of the plastic, which changes just by a little bit the cut sizes, right? So yes, if you want to have a whole fun day at your laser cutter, like doing this, knock yourself out, it's free. I'll probably throw proper cut versions on Red Team Tools at some point if people keep asking me. I did bring a bunch here, so if you're playing the game, you can have one for free now because, you know, I'm a nice guy, but hooray. In general, once you've gotten these bidding values, that's kind of only half the battle though, because you still need to produce a key. When people think about creating a key, like cutting a key, there's a couple bits of information you need. One, you do need to know what blank you're using. You need to know which keyway profile, which brand of lock it is. And profiles can get a little complicated. There are a lot of really weird keyway profiles out in the world. Fortunately, not too many here in America, but there are bizarre ones out there. The weirdest stuff you're more likely to encounter, especially in commercial environments here in North America, are what are called section keyways. So not really weird, obscure brands, just lesser known keyway profiles of well-known brands. So Schlage C is probably something that everyone has in their pocket right now. Schlage E, you might have seen one in your life even if you didn't realize it. F is rare, G is super rare. But on big commercial environments, they have keys like this on site sometimes. And there's multi-section keyways like this. There's multi-section blanks that work in different, different locks across the board. Thankfully, what we usually roll around with, this little bag right here, contains what are called super top section keys. So this is just a bag full of all of the absolute most useful do everything blanks that you can imagine. They are, like the top section of all keys, they exist. These are all, again, these are resources that locksmiths are well known to use. You might not encounter these kind of charts. There's a lot of complicated keyways out there, but things like the ILCO key blank directory is a free PDF. It's actually multiple PDFs, and you can download that. It's online, and I really like the printed version of the ILCO key catalog is real size. Everything is to scale, so if you have a key, you can lay it down in the book, or you can stick it straight on the page and look at the keyway profile, so you can figure out what key you're using. In the real world, if you don't have these resources, the best thing I'll tell you is try not to make this mistake. Taking a photo dead on from a key, like I want to get the keyway profile. This photo is not helping you. Spend a few extra seconds, get a black piece of paper or color a piece of paper black and shove the key through it. Get that contrast, you will thank yourself later. I know your adrenaline's up on jobs when you're in the building and am I going to get caught? Spend the extra 2 seconds so that when you're back with your team at night, everyone's like, damn, you couldn't have done any better job on this freaking key, really? Again, just a little black piece of paper. What do? Those little graph charts that I make, I laser them with little grooves and I just color the back black. So this is like a little shutter. I can shove my key through it, get really crisp photos, put the key right back on the desk wherever I was, and then I've got everything I need. I've got the profile that I know the blank, I've decoded the values, so I know the bidding values, and it's time to produce a duplicate. Now, most people, when they think of making a key on a key machine, originating a key, like not just a little stylus cutter, but if you just have a code and you want to code cut a key, most people imagine that entails a big complicated machine. Here we have like a Silca Futura, there's, Kaba Ilco makes the ultra code, these are mini CNC machines that have all the code book values built in, and you don't need an original, you can just punch in numbers, and this machine will just make you a key. That's noisy, it's a lot of power, it's a lot of space, it's heavy, it's expensive. What do I like to use? Well, there's something like this. This is a punch machine. No electricity, super small footprint, and it works across tons of different brands. How does it work? We don't have to watch the whole clip here, but there's basically a traverse and a plunge, and it's 2 little micrometer arms that measure where the jaw, which holds the blank key, where it is positionally and depth-wise. So if you're working on one brand of lock, all you do, these blue cards are interchangeable. HPC, now HPC is a division of Hudson, has been making this machine forever. And it's awesome. It's essentially an analog way of doing digital, precise cuts. And I think we can even show, if we jump ahead a little bit to a different brand, let's say we wanted to make a key by code. How does that work? Well, I've got my blank in there. I line up to the depth and position, punch. I move over, okay. What's the next position on the key? The next position is the second position. Okay, move over to that. What is my depth? Okay, my depth is 7. Dial my needle arm over to 7. It is like unscrew-upable. And it has all the same results as the much bigger, much more complex, like Futura machine or any of the big machines that you would see in a lock shop. So you can originate a brand new key right there in the field. Like we've done this, in our car before. If we pop the key out, you'd see it's a perfect, crisp key. Now, this isn't like pocket-sized, right? This is. This is called a pack-a-punch. This is what Drew turned us onto, our buddy, and he always has this in his field bag. Again, everything's a trade-off, right? What's the trade-off? You don't see little blue cards that go in and out of this machine. This is one brand only. There's a nice big S on the side of it. Why do you think it's an S? Yeah, Schlage. And the ones we all have are all Schlage. But it has 2 adjustments. You can see this little jaw head will adjust up or down. It'll traverse up or down. And then there's a carriage in the front that you lock your key into, and this carriage will position your key side to side. So you can choose which position you're working on, punch. Advance to the next position, change your value, punch. You can knock a key out in almost no time. In fact, let's just let this one play for a second, because I love how well this is made. I love how it's about as small as you could ever make a really precision tool. It's the next to, you can manually file keys. We've done this a lot. You can sit there and file, and if you have a key gauge, you can check your cuts. But this versus filing, fuck a bunch of filing, because this thing is incredible. So we index it on the first position, okay? You can see coming out the other side. So that someone once in our class, they were like, the numbers only go 1 to 3. I'm like, yeah, keep going. They pop out the other side. It's really just, they made it as compact as they possibly could. So we've got our chart value here. If we found the key on the job and we want to duplicate this key, all right, take our depth to 4. Looks pretty good. All right, we're on 4. Just when you use these, and you can use these, I brought it free to use in the contest. Just hold down on that jaw head so it doesn't bounce around when you punch. All right, move to the next position. What's the next value? The next value on position 2 is a 7. All right, dial our depth to 7. Little red numbers on the 7, and you can even see the little debris fall right out the end of it. If that little bit that you nipped off the key falls down on the carpet in the office where you're breaking in, is that covert or surreptitious? That is covert. That is not surreptitious if you're leaving evidence behind. Do this shit in the car, or I'm not gonna lie, I've done it in a bathroom stall over a toilet, and just flush the brass. And there we go, we're halfway done this key. I guarantee you, if this was hand filing, this would not be halfway done by now. And it would not be nearly as precise and nice looking. All right, moving along, we're on the 5th position now. All right, the 5th value, okay, almost done. Dial it in. And there we go. In virtually no time, we've not just duplicated, it's called originated. We have originated a brand new key. And comparing that to the original factory cut key, that's it. That is it. You just made a key right there. That's probably the best case scenario for when you've stolen a key value and you want to produce a key in the field. What is the least best scenario, but the coolest one in my opinion? The coolest scenario is molded cast. Remember I mentioned that you could clay cast the key for information and take that information away? That's not the only thing you can do with the clay kit. And if you see on the table here, I don't know if we'll have time for it during Q&A or not, or over later on. I brought clay, I brought the mold. We can absolutely take this little cup of metal. It's like you're in Wild West, right? You're making like a shot for a rifle, except you're not. What you're doing is using a little hot cup of metal, melting a little Woods metal ingot. You get this little metal slurry. You pour it right into your clay mold. Pop out a fully working key. It's not going to be as strong as a real key, but I tell you what, I want people to try this later, and we're going to set up somewhere over in the hangout area. I brought all these supplies for you to try it, and if you don't mind a little bit of flame and vapors that you shouldn't breathe, definitely try this. But before I let you go, I got a challenge for you. I have developed a little mini game, a little mini contest that anyone in this room has the knowledge and ability to participate in right now. For the rest of the day, I will be working with people who want to try everything you just saw. Specifically, I have 2 locks with me. Big ups to Syntax Error, who prints these little lock mounts. They're really awesome for contests and things. So he's a good dude, and he sent me a couple, and I was like, oh, I know what I'm doing with this. After my talk is done, Tara is up in the next room, so I'm going to watch her. But I'm going to then tweet after that a nice crisp photo of a key on graph paper. Look for this photo. It'll be nice and high resolution. Not this exact photo. Those of you pulling phones out right now, I photoshopped it slightly. But if you can take this photo that you see online, again, all of my stuff is up on my GitHub. I'm going to tweet a link to it as well. Use that visual template. Use the decoding lines. Figure out what the bidding is. If you figured out what you think the bidding is, come find me. You can definitely originate your own key. I brought a ton of blanks. See if it works. If it opens lock 1, terrific. You're partway there. If it opens lock 1, I'm going to ask you for a way I can reach out to you with another photo. You're going to get a photo that's slightly crappier, but I guarantee you the same process will work. Photo decode this type of photo. Make a key for lock number 2. If you've done that, you're really chugging. There's only one challenge left, and I want to see if anyone can get all through all 3 in the last few hours of the con. Both of these 2 locks together are mastered. They are both mastered. They both have master pins. I'm not asking anyone to disassemble them, but knowing what you know between 2 keys that work individually, can you reverse out, and I'll help you along a little bit. There's ways you can get hints. If you can determine the top master key and produce a key that opens both locks, you are the top prize winner, and I'm going to have prizes for the top 3 or 4 people to do that. So ultimately, I brought blanks, I brought files. If you want to use better tools, then like this stuff is all free here. If you want to use the Pack-a-Punch and stuff, or you want hints, well, the world kind of sucks a big fucking ball of dicks right now. So if you donate to any of these charities that matter a lot to me based on what's going on in the world, if you donate to the Sex Workers Outreach Project, to RAIN, to the Trevor Project, I will flood you with additional help, advice, by all means. Like, thank you. But even if you don't want to do that, if you just want to come and get hands-on, if you want to play with cast and mold, we're going to do all this stuff. After Tara's talk, I'm going to be out there somewhere just in the hangout zone, probably where the food used to be on those big tables, if they're still there. So please come by, look online. At 3 p.m., this key is going to go up, and I'm going to do this till we close. And we got a minute or 2 for questions, but other than that, thank you so much.